All right, fantastic. So we are live, and I am so happy today. I cannot express my happiness in words. I'm really short of words. Um, I have told you both, Lisa and Janet, that I have been wanting to do this, but I need to express this to my audience. Okay, with me today are two ladies who have helped me shape my career in a big way, because for a really, really long time, even my LinkedIn bio had Agile Testing Evangelist written there. And people would ask me, what is Agile testing? And I would say, go and read the books that these two ladies have written. So that is the kind of influence that both of you have had on me. And it is so exciting for me to be hosting both of you on this live AMA. So thank you so much, Lisa and Janet. I am so thankful both of you have taken some time and are here live with us today.
It is good to be here.
Yeah, definitely our pleasure. Thank you for inviting us.
All right, so Lisa and Janet have both written agile testing condensed, and a lot of material which is available online. They've given a lot of talks which we've all read, we've all learned from. But the first question that comes to my mind, and I'll tell you the reason for that question also, when I try to look for both of you, I see separate pictures, even though both of you, when people take your names, they take it in the same breath. But the pictures are always separate. So I was like, where can I find one single picture of both these ladies in one frame? And that's the request that I even made you. And fortunately, I got one that was shared. So I said, no, I'm going to use this one. This is a perfect picture. So I want to know from you, how did both of you come together? How did both of you meet?
All right. Do you want to start that, Lisa?
Well, sure. Back in 2000, I guess, I was a tester on an extreme programming team, wondering what to do, and Brian Merrick put me in touch with Janet because he said she's a tester on an extreme programming team too. And so we started sharing ideas, and I co-wrote a book, Testing Extreme Programming, back then with a different co-author, Tip House. And so Janet helped us with the book, and we'd send her a chapter and say, does this seem like what your team does, or do these techniques work for your team? And she'd give us the feedback. And so that's how we started working together. And we both went to the early XP conferences.
XP Universe.
XP Universe. Yeah. And then we even started writing and presenting together. So, yeah.
Yeah. So from my side, I ended up as a tester on an Agile team, and I started to panic because when I walked into that team, one of the programmers, and they were doing extreme programming, but one of the programmers said to me, so Janet, you're the tester on the team. What are you going to do? We do all our own testing. And so I had this panic attack. I said to him at the time, I said, well, let's just figure it out together. And we did, and it worked out. But having this panic attack, I went back, and the only person I knew who was in Agile and testing was Brian Merrick. So thankfully, he put us in touch. And well, the rest is history as such.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So Brian did a fan. Sorry,
he did. Yeah.
So he's done a brilliant job in bringing the two of you together.
Yeah, he's still out there. He's still out there spreading ideas. He just started a podcast, and the other day he had Elizabeth Hendrickson and Chris McMahon on his podcast talking about testing. Right. So he's still doing it.
Yep, I have to go listen to that one too. Yeah, but yes.
No. So yeah, I mean, God bless Brian for doing this wonderful thing. So another story that spins out of this is this is a question which is very close to my heart. Now, the donkey and the dragon. Now, when I think of that, Shrek comes to my mind. And so
the donkey.
Yeah, but again, how did this come about? And so could you
Okay.
tell us more?
So dragons, I love fantasy books, and my favorite series is the Dragon Riders of Pern, where they empathize with their human riders and things. And so dragons have always kind of held a special spot in my heart. The friendly dragons, not the Game of Thrones dragons, but the
Yeah.
friendly ones. And so my company name is Dragonfire, and that's been something for me. And the donkeys, Lisa.
Yeah, I grew up riding horses and had horses throughout my life, but just by a series of events, ended up with a miniature donkey that a friend of mine's neighbor rescued from an auction, and then we got this miniature donkey. Like, oh, this is interesting. Let's teach it to drive and pull a cart. And then we learned that donkeys need another donkey friend. They like horses and other animals, but they really need another donkey. So we got a second miniature donkey, and then we moved to our own place and had the two miniature donkeys. So they can't defend themselves against predators like coyotes. So we had to get us a large size donkey to defend the little donkey. So yeah, now we're up to 4 donkeys. So that's just what I do in my spare time, is play with the donkeys, drive them, take them hiking, and yeah. So I use a donkey as my professional logo, and you got to go with what you love.
It's good to have a little fun with things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I like how you've combined them in your logos as well. And now that you've brought them together, it is really a build up of a fantasy story. So
And we would have loved to have used the donkey itself, but that would be copyright kind
There
of
you go.
infringement, and we really didn't want to be sued.
And we can also,
yes.
I've learned a lot from my donkeys that have helped me on Agile teams. And I don't know if the same is true for dragons for Janet, but it gives me a perspective into things that are important for humans too.
Right. Right. And now I'd like to move the conversation towards testing, our favorite subject.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, both of you started off as testers in teams with, doing extreme programming. And from there, we've seen Agile evolve to where it is standing today. You know, in today's context, we don't hear much of extreme programming, but still, we speak about agile, we speak about agility so much. How do you think, how do you see testing fit into the whole scheme of things back then compared to how does it fit in right now? Have you seen a transition? Have you seen a change?
Well, I mean, I would say with extreme programming, the teams I was on, that we were Kool-Aid drinkers. We were following the extreme programming practices that Kent Beck laid out in his first book. And that was very much focused on everybody testing, test-driven development, automating tests, working closely with customers, very disciplined. And I would say, which worked very well, I would say that teams today that call themselves Agile often don't have that discipline. They're not doing test-driven development. They're not making the investment in quality that the good extreme programming teams did. But of course, good Agile teams do. The other change I've seen is the extreme programming is very focused on functional testing only. And I mean, it was several years into working on extreme programming teams before I realized, maybe we should be doing like performance testing, security testing, so exploratory. Yeah. Well, we did exploratory testing, but yeah, we're a little behind on that.
Yeah. So I just did a talk yesterday on quality attributes. And when I was doing that talk, it reminded me, and I'm going to go back again to Brian Merrick, who has had such an influence on me. But back in those early days when Lisa and I were attending conferences, and there was a time when her and I were the only testers at an Agile conference. Mm-hmm. And Brian, but he never actually associated himself as being a tester, I think. But anyhow,
yeah.
every tester I ran into at that point said, this will never work. Because even though I was living and proving that it did work, but they said it wouldn't work because XP only talked about customer tests, the functional ones, and programmer tests, unit tests. And it said it forgot everything else, all those other kinds of tests. The XP team that I was on, my very first one, we also did load testing because I paired with the programmers a lot doing those things. But there wasn't a way to talk about it because it didn't fit into that customer test versus programming test. Mm-hmm. So when Brian, and he did this in 2003, we were at a conference, and him, Brett Petticord, and I were sitting, and it's one of those, 3 o'clock in the morning kinds of things.
When we were young.
When we were young. And Brian wrote out this agile testing quadrants idea on a napkin. And I said, this is brilliant. It finally gives us a way to talk about all those other kinds of testing, that whole quadrant 4, talking about the quality attributes from there, those ilities. And I think that to me was a turning point as well, being able to talk about all of those. Doesn't mean we can't do it in XP, doesn't mean we can't do it in any of the other agile methodologies, but it gave us that purpose, that way to talk about it. And I think that was important.
Well, that is, again, a very interesting story. And you've just given me a couple more questions, which I'll come to a little later. But I again want to shift my focus a little bit and want to talk about your first book together, Agile Testing. So what was the basic motivation behind writing that book? Because that is, for me, for any tester getting into, an agile team, that book for me is definitely a game changer. If they have not read that book, it is extremely, extremely recommended. And I can tell you this, I can give you in writing. I can put all my money on it because I read it and it changed my thinking forever. Because it's not just about the way you test; it's the way about you think. Being an agile team, and that's the influence. Of course, we'll come to the other books later, but this one, how did it come about, and what was the motivation?
How you got dragged into that?
Yeah, I was dragged in. So Lisa was approached by Addison Wesley, who published her first book, to write a second book, and when she, by that time we'd been doing presentations and things. So she said, Janet, and we knew we had a lot of the same ideas, the same thoughts. And she said, Janet, would you write this with me? And I went, no, Lisa, I can't write. I am not a writer. That is not something I do. I can't write. I can't write. And she goes, oh yeah. And she just kept after me and so insistent. And I finally said, well, okay, what's the worst that can happen? So gave up 1.5 years of our lives because we were both doing full-time jobs at the time. And we wrote the book. And so one of the reasons that you can't find any pictures of us together is because we don't see each other very often at all at conferences. And that's about it. We keep forgetting to take pictures of ourselves together. But we did that first book all remotely. We did it very agilely, but we did it all remotely because Lisa at the time lived in Denver and I lived in Calgary. 2 different countries even.
Well, so Lisa, you want to add something?
No, I mean, it is like they asked me to write a second book, but be more general to Agile, not just extreme programming. And my first co-author, Tip, was not interested in doing another book. Smart guy. He knew it was a lot of work. But I was so happy that Janet agreed to do it because we have such complementary skill sets. So I love to write. Had a lot of experience by that point, but Janet's super organized and she's a great agile product owner. And she organized that, like we mind mapped the book, we created a release plan, we had it all mapped out. We had all these milestones, 2 chapters every 2 weeks, switching back and forth, a process for having people review it, incorporating that feedback. And it was all very organized. We always stayed on time. In fact, I think we even got ahead of time in terms of the publisher. And that's been true of every one of our books. And that's all down to Janet. I've learned a lot of good organizational skills from her.
And we were flexible. We actually moved our deadline ahead because the publisher said, there's a need for this. Can we push it up 3 months? And we went.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to also learn what was good enough. And as it turns out, it truly was, because we really didn't add or change anything in the book up until today. Yep.
I don't think you need to change anything in that book. So, well, here is a question, and maybe Prachi can clarify that a bit. But how can one identify and achieve testing goals? I'm just probably eliminating the first testing bit from that question. So, when you get into a project, how do you identify, test and achieve the testing goals? What would be your advice?
So I think it starts from the very beginning. When a feature is first brought to the team, as testers, we ask a lot of questions, and this is a great opportunity to start talking about risks, because what testing does is it mitigates risks.
Correct.
So if you don't understand the risks, how are you going to know what to test for? So I think at the very beginning, when you're first talking about that feature, before you even get down to the story level, start talking about risks, and then that'll give you a more general idea about what should we concentrate on our testing, and we can better judge.
Yeah, personally, what I've found to be really critical is, before we do anything, like Janet says, let's get the whole team together, but let's talk about what level of quality are we trying to achieve, because the testing is aimed at producing the level of quality that'll deliver the value our customers want, and like Janet says, mitigate any risks that could cause pain to us or the customers. But it's important for the team to make a commitment to the level of quality that they're aiming for, because it's very difficult. We're going to have lots of things in our way. If we don't have a team commitment to work towards that, it's just really easy to throw up your hands and say, well, it's too hard. The architecture of the system, we can't do this kind of testing because of that, or we don't have the right tools to do that, or we don't have the right test environment to do that. Let's just give up. And it's just too easy to do that. So a serious commitment by the whole team of, we want to write the best, and specify what it is, and just say, oh, just the best thing, shiny thing we can. Be very specific about your goals.
And I'm going to add something to that. I think it needs to go up higher than the team.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The business people, the organization has to understand what it is. So if that level of quality isn't understood by everybody, then you're going to get a lot of butting heads, a lot of misconceptions. And for example, we worked on we were creating this new feature, but the salespeople needed something to demo for a trade show. And so as testers, we wanted to test everything. And we got this little chat from the salespeople and from the other people saying, understand this is for the demo. Give us a script of exactly what works, and we will do that. Well, it changed everything about what we were testing and how we were testing. So understanding what you're building, why you're building it, it makes a huge difference, right? And I think it's important that the whole team, the delivery team, and that's what we mean when we say the whole team, understands that. But it has to come from the people above you need to understand as well.
And we really have to educate business managers and executives of what quality is, why it's important to the business, what kind of investment we need to make it happen, and how that's going to pay off for them.
Yeah, for sure.
And that is Really, really tough thing to do because
It is.
because they have their own thought processes, they have their own biases, and to
Mhm.
overcome those, it is sometimes a challenge.
Well,
So
that's why you
here,
have to have that conversation.
yes, okay, and here's an interesting question, and this is my favorite too,
Mm.
Kshitij. Okay, there is no mention of test or quality in the Agile Manifesto. So, do you think testing and testers have been ignored or sidelined as a core part of Agile teams?
Well, there
Well,
certainly weren't any testers there, unless you count Brian, and there
yeah.
certainly weren't any women there. Maybe there was one.
Was there?
However,
I don't think there
No,
were.
no, no, no.
I think
I
there
don't
was
think
one
there was a
woman.
one.
I think somebody was invited, they just couldn't make it,
No, maybe.
but I don't think there were.
But
Um,
Brian is. I mean, let's consider him a tester. So,
Yeah. Yeah, but what the manifesto did was when they talked about and I would have inserted maybe a couple of words in there, but when they talked about working software
yeah,
and you look at the principles behind it, it means let's get good software out. Like it was implied, but they should have said maybe quality working software. But they're trying to, and I don't know what they were trying to do, but I might have put quality in there someplace, but they never did.
well, and the
But it's
principles they
hard.
do.
But the
And
principles
the
it is,
principles they do.
and that I think is a lot of times people don't read. They read
Yeah,
those 4 lines and they never read the principles behind it. And the principles are far more important.
they are. Yeah, it was interesting because I don't know, I was listening to some lean coffee or something that the
Mhm.
Agile Alliance was putting on, and somebody said, that she had asked people where she worked or something, how many of you have read the Agile testing principles, and most of them didn't even know. So I asked my
Yeah,
team at the time the same thing, and they're like, "The what?"
the agile,
I
the
mean,
agile
Agile
principles. Yeah,
Manifesto, the Agile
yeah,
principles, not the Agile. I'm so
yeah.
used to saying testing after the word Agile. But yeah, just go to the agilemanifesto.org and click on to see the
The
principles. And
principles.
our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software.
Yes.
There's a lot of implication of quality.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily spelled out.
And I think the problem is that a lot of people say or think that if it doesn't say testers, that they're eliminated, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean that. Right. Lisa and I just invited ourselves
Just
in.
elbowed our way in there.
We did. And sometimes that's what you have to do,
Even now, yeah.
even now.
Well, here is an interesting question.
Mm.
How agile testing is different from testing in agile team?
It isn't.
Are-
It isn't any different. It was just I don't even know. I think did we? I don't even know how we started calling it agile testing. I don't remember.
I think it was because we said I had a book called XP testing, so let's call this book Agile testing. I think that might have even been the publisher's idea.
Yeah, no idea. I don't remember how it.
But
it
we
just,
finally did define it on our blog.
Yeah, we did.
Um,
Many years later.
So, so when you are testing in an agile team, what are some of the things that you should or you must definitely do in order to win the confidence of other team members, the stakeholders and the business owners, whoever?
Um, is that a one answer question? Or because there's lots of things. It's never in isolation, right? So
Yeah,
collaboration to me is probably the number one thing. Just being, but there's also being open and listening, knowing that there's different sides to every story, and really and maybe realizing that my thoughts could be wrong. They often are, right? And I think that many years ago, I went to a workshop, and the facilitators who gave it are sadly no longer with us. But the thing that came across to me and still sticks to me is thinking about it with a beginner's mind, going into anything with an open mind, being able to challenge your own thinking. And I think that that's a really important thing, no matter where you are. And now I'll turn this over to Lisa to add her thoughts.
Well, I mean, we talked about what is agile testing versus testing in agile. And I would say two different terms of the same thing. But if you look at the definition that we came up with a lot of input from the community, collaborative testing practices, so collaborative is the first word, that occur continuously from inception to delivery and beyond, supporting frequent delivery of value for our customers. Testing activities focus on building quality into the product, using fast feedback loops to validate our understanding. So I think there's a lot about learning in there. And like Janet said, keeping an open mind. The practices strengthen and support the idea of whole team responsibility for quality. So, what I like about using principles like the Agile principles is we can use those to guide us. We'll make different decisions depending on our context. Mm-hmm. But if we're not sure what to do, we go back to the principles and let those guide us.
Yeah. Well, quite interestingly, Lisa, I have borrowed and used that definition in a lot of conferences where I've spoken about agile and testing, and I sort of believe that it is not just the agile context; it covers a lot more than just thinking about agile. And that definition, I mean, hats off to both of you for putting in those very valuable terms, like, for example, collaboration, for example, of building something of value to the customer. Now, when I talk about value to the customer, let me bring in the context here again that we were just speaking before we went live. And so a lot of times when I discuss with the customers and they say, oh, no, that's fine. We will build our features. We'll ship it to them. They'll report bugs. Well, doesn't happen in my opinion. Okay, it's very hard for me to convince them that, the customers will not report bugs. The customers will just switch over to another vendor. They will not wait for you. I mean, we have that, right? If we look for, if we are looking for flight tickets, for example, on one app, and that app is for some reason misbehaving, we simply switch off and jump onto another application. Yeah, we do that, right? It's human tendency. So what, in your view, would you suggest in terms of customer collaboration? Collaboration, fine, within the team is good, but how do you build up that collaboration with the customer?
I'm going to say it depends, right? Because sometimes you have that customer access, right? But sometimes I know it's a lot harder. I always fight for customer access if I can, but sometimes, it's the masses. And then I have to try to find some place to really understand the customer. And I'll try to get as many ideas. So even thinking about personas, what's important. But a lot of times it comes from that product owner who's on a team, right? The product manager. And if they have a different idea and you can't convince them otherwise, like you were just saying, sometimes you just kind of got to go, fine, let the train wreck. And I hate to do that, but I have done it in the past because you can't fight, right? But I tried so hard to try to get access to the customers and get that in. And I think it comes back to when we're first talking about being involved early. As a tester, if you're involved late, you have no input into any of that, and you have to guess. But if you're involved early, then you can ask a lot of those questions to say, what's that heuristic? What's on the news. What don't you want on the newspaper tomorrow or the day after you release? And so thinking about those kinds of heuristics is definitely going to help. But you have to be involved early and ask for those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I mean, I've worked in business domains where for privacy reasons or because our customers were our partners' customers, not our own personal customers, so we couldn't access them. There are many other ways you can get the information. Your people in marketing, the people doing user research, and maybe in design, customer support.
Yeah,
you know a lot about customers. Get your customer support people to help you. Competitors, look at your competitors if you can. That's also sometimes hard in those domains too. But what are the competitors doing? That might give you an idea of what their customers value. So there are other ways, and we really need to work at those ways. If there's a good reason we can't get direct access with customers.
And those, in my opinion, are some valuable inputs for the test that you're designing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the way you can design your experiments and play around and can actually gauge, okay, this is good for our health, this is something, okay, we can think about it later, and so on and so forth. So on those lines, there is this very interesting question. What would you expect testers to be influencers in agile teams and driving value and talking about risks?
Do you want to start this one, Lisa?
Sure. Janet and I I think we've always seen testers as in a kind of consulting role. And I know for the last 10 years of my career as a tester on a team, I've considered myself more of a test consultant. Partly because I see more and more that there are fewer and fewer testers on teams. And that can be okay if the developers and other people are doing testing, but we need to, like Janet says, we need to get people. We need to ask those questions. What headline don't we want to see in the newspaper after we release or on social media? Or what's the worst thing that could happen? Or have you thought about this? Asking those open-ended questions to get people thinking. That's one thing we can do. And influencing, trying to, if there's some problem we know the team's having that's been coming up at retrospectives, maybe we learn about some technique that we think could help us overcome that problem. Encouraging the team is like, can we experiment with this? Can I take 30 minutes and show this to you? And then maybe we could try it for 2 weeks, or we could try it for our next iteration planning or whatever it is. If you can get people to try little baby steps, sometimes you can influence that way. But I think it's really important to advocate for quality. It doesn't really do any good to evangelize or cheerlead, but to point out the value in it. And I've personally found it really helpful to use the patterns in Linda Rising and Mary Lynn Mann's books, Fearless Change and More Fearless Change. There are some patterns in there that can help you, a little tiny bit, find a lot of times just finding one ally on the team who thinks like you do. Now the two of you can brainstorm. How can we get more people on our team to try this? There are always going to be people who never want to do anything different, or they don't want to change. You just have to accept that. But let's try influencing one person and doing more. Yeah. A lot of different approaches.
Yeah. I think that comes into scope of control, right? I can control what I do. I can't control what anybody else does, but I can influence. So finding that one person, and I always start with that one person. If I'm wanting to pair with a programmer, for example, I will find the programmer that I am the most friendly with, that we have some kind of relationship with, even if it's just we share liking Dragon Riders and Pern. I don't care what it is, right? But find something that you have a relationship with, and then start talking with that person, and that's how the change can happen, right? You don't want to go up and start with a developer that is really antagonistic towards you, because you're just going to both be in failure mode to start with. But never underestimate how much influence you have just by even talking with one person or bringing up a question and asking it. Never underestimate.
I think a great example recently is our friend Lisi Hake in Germany, who joined a new company in January. And Lisi, like we are, is a fan of pairing and working in ensembles.
Yep.
These people all work solo. They've never done anything else. And she has been tweeting and blogging about her experiences in slowly influencing, asking one developer, oh, I'm looking at this issue. Could you look at it with me? And then they learn something together, and the developer goes away thinking, wow, I'm really glad I learned that.
Yeah.
And in just what's this, September, just in 9 months, recently the team said, we love pairing. We're going to make this our standard practice. Yeah. And she was on our we have our Donkeys and Dragons video chat on our Agile Testing Fellow YouTube channel. And we had a really short chat with her, learning some of the ways that she did this influence. And I mean, she's a very nice, polite, you wouldn't think, she's not an assertive, let's do this. She just, in her low-key way, let's learn together is basically the approach she took, and it worked. So there are a lot of different ways to approach it.
I'm glad you brought this up, Lisa, because I was going to come to that, and you've already mentioned. So for those of you, who are looking to learn, there is this wonderful channel on YouTube called Agile Testing Fellow. Obviously, the two ladies running that channel are right in front of you. They have some wonderful videos up there already, and people like Lizzie Hawke get invited to the channel, and we have some wonderful conversations going. Mm-hmm. The link to their channel is there on the description of this particular video, and you will also find that in the featured channels of the Test Chat community. So that channel, your channel is already added in my list. Now, you spoke about building allies, right? And in my opinion, one of the biggest ally of any tester is metrics. And I have a wonderful question related to that, because metrics is all about data, right? Now, the way we want to look at it, a lot of people look at it from a different perspective, but I feel that data can be a wonderful friend of a tester if used in the right.
Yeah.
So there is this great question that has come in. What are quality metrics that would be useful and meaningful for Agile teams to measure?
So I'm going to go back to kind of sidetrack back to a comment that I made earlier about letting the train wreck. If I can't change behavior, sometimes I just say, okay, this is what we're doing. But what you need to do is gather metrics around that. Because if you know that if the system goes down and you know why it went down, because you've been saying it for months, figure out how long it takes to fix it. Try to find some way to gather how much time it took to fix it. What was the cost? Those dollars, you can go back and say, the last time you ignored me, this is what it cost. It cost you 20 man days or anything, but put it in a dollar value. And that metric is very useful because that's how you can drive change as well. So, but let's go back to that.
I learned years ago from Janet that the first step in solving a problem is make it visible. So find the ways to make it visible. Put something up on, in an office, we could put it up on a wall. Now we have to find ways to put it on the virtual wall, maybe the team wiki or something like that, or bring it up at retrospectives or stand-up meetings or planning meetings. But also, my experience is that, again, on our team, on the teams I've been on, we started by setting our goals that related to quality, and then how can we measure those? Or we're doing an experiment, a small experiment to see if we can improve. Oh, we're having a problem with our cycle time being very long because our product owner rejects half the stories that we deliver because we misunderstood how that feature should behave or that piece of functionality should behave. So I learned about example mapping. So we had an experiment. Let's try example mapping for 1 or 2 iterations. And we believe that it will cause the rejection rate to go down and the cycle time to go down. So we could measure those things. And so we were already gathering, we already had those metrics available in our system. So they're easy to get. And so it did work. It went down by half. If it hadn't worked, we would have learned something and tried something else. And so using metrics that match what your goals are I think that's really important. And also, talking about data, Janet came up with a holistic testing model where we're testing all the way around our whole software development lifecycle. Let's get data from production. How are our customers using the product? Are they even using the new feature we just put out there? That's going to tell us a lot about quality too. So these days we have so many great ways that we can instrument our code and gather huge amounts of data, and then we have tools to help us analyze that data. And so there's a lot that we can learn, and we have make use of this new technology that lets us learn from production as well.
Yeah, I don't think counting the number of bugs you have helps identify if you've got quality, because it might identify that you have bad quality, but it doesn't tell you have good quality. Though I had a story long ago, and this is a physical storyboard we did. One of the things, we had our stories up, but every bug that we found, we put on a pink index card by the story. We didn't count them. We didn't measure them. We just put up a pink story card or a pink bug. What that did, and it's part of making it visible, was it brought to the attention to the team how many bugs we had for every story. And like Lisa said, then you started thinking about, why is this happening? And do an experiment to say, all right, we're obviously not spending enough time understanding the story. Or maybe the story was too big, or whatever it was. But the result was, eventually, those pink cards were reduced. And the problem went away because we were addressing the problem. We never actually counted the number of bugs. We didn't keep track of it. We didn't trend it. We didn't do anything. We just made it visible. But because we went and identified the issue, our quality went up because we fixed that.
Yeah, and I miss physical boards, but but even in Jira, the last team I worked on, we're like, well, what do we do when we think, we're doing test-driven development, we're trying to test all along the way, but yet when we finally do our final testing on a story before the product owner accepts it, we do find bugs. What do we do with these bugs to make them visible? And what we decided to do with Jira specifically was make subtasks of that Jira ticket. Because in Jira, then that was something you could easily make visible. Why does this story ticket have all these subtasks that are bugs? And it's the same thing as Janet. We didn't count them, but every day at stand up, we can look and see, wow, we have 5 subtasks that are bugs from this ticket. And we can think about that in our retrospective, or have a retrospective right then of what's going on and what can we do to address it.
So we've been talking about Agile metrics, but I want to bring to your attention something that we discussed extensively on Twitter, and that was the Dora Metrics, about which both of you have written extensively on your blog as well. And I was the one who was, pushing away, going, we need to use this more often, because now we have, I wouldn't say shifted context, but we have started looking a lot wider, and we bring DevOps in the whole scheme of things. And that is where your holistic testing viewpoint also comes in much more handy. Initially, the question was, okay, where could we test? So Dan Ashby provided that wonderful continuous testing model, but you've taken it to a next level where, we could actually know that, okay, at every stage, what are we getting out of? I mean, what is that thing that we are getting out of every stage, and how it is benefiting us? Now, talking about metrics, the Dora Metrics. How do you see that changing the scheme of things, and what is your recommendation for teams to start using it more frequently?
Yeah, one thing I like about the Dora Metrics is that they were shown to correlate with high-performing teams through scientific research using the State of DevOps
Yes.
survey. So just if people don't know what they are, deployment frequency, lead time for changes, change failure rate, and time to restore service. I do think that they're useful sort of generic metrics that apply in very many contexts, and I know lots of organizations using them. It's pretty easy to gather that data. So I think it's not a big investment to start tracking those metrics, and they're going to give you information that you can learn from.
Yeah, the one thing to know is it measures process quality, not product quality.
Yes.
So those are two different things, right?
Well, the failure rate could
failure
be.
rate.
It's an indicator.
Yeah.
It's an indicator, but it's really about the process, right? But it can be an indicator, the failure rate.
Well, the time to recover or time between failures will also give you an indication of how good or bad product quality is. But you're absolutely right. Now, I've been also a big proponent of the space metrics being used in tandem with the Dora metrics.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is where, because we are focusing on productivity, and we are talking about well-being, because quite often what happens is, in a lot of conversations, we say, okay, how many test cases did you write in 1 hour? How many bugs did you find? I mean, irrelevant stuff, okay?
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter. But I will tell you that there are situations where these numbers are used for appraisals, for rating people. And this is a big sham, okay?
Well, performance appraisals in general are a big sham, but those things in particular. But going back real quick to the Dora metrics, if people are interested in how do you measure those, Google has an open source project called 4 Keys that you can find on GitHub. If you're not already measuring those, that's one way, just to show people that some of these are easy to try out. But the space metrics I like because you start getting into the really important things. We know that psychological safety is a prerequisite for high performing teams. And so those measure developer satisfaction and things like that. Those are very important metrics as well.
Absolutely. And the way it is tied up, where you have got productivity, efficiency, everything there, but at the forefront is your, well-being, which is being considered, and satisfaction, which is being considered. So you are not looking at something in isolation. You're combining those factors and then telling, okay, you know what? This is where we stand. So there you can take more, I would say, meaningful decisions rather than just saying, oh, how many test cases have you written or how many bugs have you found?
It starts to treat team members as individual people,
Correct.
not as plug and play. So one of the things that I've said forever is you can't have people on 2 teams. You cannot treat them as plug and play because we're people. We're not resources. It's just not. It's not the same thing. And those metrics start to take that into consideration. So that's important.
Right. So here is the next question. And this is more from a, methodology perspective. Can you tell us a little more about ATDD and how can adoption of ATDD help agile teams drive better quality?
So we're both a fan of ATDD, acceptance test-driven development, which is the generic form. There's also teams are doing BDD, behavior-driven development, or SBE, specification by example. Those are all the same premise, guiding development with examples. So it should have been called example-driven development or example-guided development or something.
Brian tried to call it that in 2003.
It didn't catch on. So we're kind of stuck with these ones now. But when we start with those concrete examples, and so it makes such a difference about how people understand the problem. So if we take something really, really simple, like adding two numbers together. So if we had a story that said, add two numbers together, people go, oh, that's simple, and go start coding. But if we start looking at acceptance test-driven development, we're going to start looking at tests. We're going to start looking at examples. And I might say to the product owner, so 1 + 1 = 2. That's an example. Yes. So great. What about 1.0 + 1? What do you expect to see then? What about if I say 1.254365 + 1? What do you expect to see? What if I say -1 + 2? What do you expect? What about if I say -2 + 1? It starts getting you into all kinds of other conversations, like how many decimal places? Are we going to start to round? Are we going to truncate? Are we going to show negative numbers in parentheses or as red or as a minus sign? All of a sudden that story grew. And by using those concrete examples, which is really what acceptance testing is about, or acceptance test-driven development is about, it helps us understand the story so much better and eliminate those defects in code, eliminate writing a ton of bugs or a ton of defects in your bug tracking system. It saves time.
Yeah, preventing bugs over detecting them after the fact. Yeah. It's always a preference. We value, that could be the manifesto. We value preventing bugs over protecting them.
That could be in a testing manifesto. I wonder if that's in Karen and the testing manifesto, the Agile testing manifesto. Sorry.
I hear music.
I forgot to turn my phone off. Or to put it on silent. Yeah.
Oh, that's a nice ringtone. So,
yeah.
Okay, here is the next question that has come in. Can testers with less coding skills survive in the Agile industry because Agile demands lots of automation?
You want to get me started on this topic?
Yes, go ahead.
I mean, it's really true. I would say your life will be easier if you're a coder. It's true. On the other hand, automation is a whole team responsibility, just like all other testing activities. And we already have people on the team who are great at writing code. What we need are people on the team who are great at specifying and designing tests and making sure that we're covering all our risks and we have good regression test coverage and performance, whatever kind of testing we need, that we have it. And we need those different skill sets. If everybody on the team is a coder, I've been on teams where the programmers did all the test automation, including at the UI level. And for some reason, and this was on more than one team, they did a great job at test-driven development. Their unit tests were pretty good. Sometimes I could help them cover more cases, but their API level tests were pretty good. Their UI level tests, like I would look with thousands of tests and they didn't have assertions. That's a problem. Why people who are really gave lots of love to their production code, but not to the test code, I don't know why that happens. But that's why we need we need the diversity. We need people with testing skills sitting with the people with programming skills. And again, the State of DevOps survey showed conclusively that teams where the developers own the tests, maintain them, take care of the automation when they fail in CI, in collaboration with testers, those are the high-performing teams. And we really need to work together. We need to pair. We need to ensemble. I know that there are contexts where having a test automation engineering team probably works or is necessary. But I think it again should be a team responsibility. Who actually sits down and does that? I don't know. But Janet and I always have said that people need to be testers need to be technically aware. We need to be able to communicate with coders and site reliability engineers and architects and people. We need to have the language. We need to have some comfort with using an integrated development environment or using the command line interface. Conversely, we hope that those people will have some comfort talking about testing.
Yeah. Yep. So even if you don't know how to write code, if you know how to read it, or you know the basic constructs, like what a
Yeah.
loop is, what an array is, or whatever language you're using, that's important.
Yes.
That is really important.
Yes. So, recently I was at a conference and a statement was made, and it was quite a bold statement that was made, where it was clearly written continuous testing is not equal to test automation. And I might as well take the name here. It was Manoj Kumar from Lambda Test, which is a company which, you know, expects you to automate and use their tool. But he made this statement, and it is so true. Now, the perception is when you talk about continuous testing, then people start thinking, oh my God, I have to automate. I don't know what am I going to do. I can't code. Also, bringing the famous holistic testing model, yours, Janet, in the whole context. When you talk about going through that loop, about learning, I mean, how much important do you think is knowing programming or coding, and how is it going to help you through that entire holistic testing journey?
Oh, I think it will help you if you know those coding. If you understand, and coding is such a big word because there's so many languages, but if you know those basic constructs, if that means that you can collaborate with the programmers a whole lot more, but it also means that you can ask better questions. You can also say things like, well, so an example. I was sitting in a story readiness meeting one time, backlog refinement meeting, and the programmers were talking about this story, and they were talking about how to implement it, and they were writing on the whiteboard, and I was just kind of sitting back and looking at this design they're talking about, and I said, the way you're talking about that, and I said, you're going to have so much flexibility, and they said, yeah, it was great, and I said, but I can't test that. So having the ability to understand their design made such a big difference, because within 5 minutes of asking that question or saying that we couldn't test it, we had a completely different design, much more simple, but still met the problem, right? And so it's important to be able to have those conversations, and knowing a little bit about coding and what code's being written helps you with that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in meetings where we were struggling with a big, like, oh, nobody knows how to do this algorithm in the code, and we just don't even think we can do it. And then one of the testers, who is maybe self-taught in Ruby, and he has some coding knowledge, comes up with an answer like, oh, we could do this. And it's like, wow. So anybody can have those brainstorms.
Yeah.
It's good to have some of those basics. I was a programmer before, and I like being a tester better. And I actually went and started, when I joined my last team, I thought, I'm going to relearn Ruby and really be able to contribute in our ensemble programming sessions. And I started taking courses and doing katas and things. And it's like, you know what? I just don't like doing this. It didn't matter, though. I could still contribute in the ensembles because, like Janet said, I could read the code. I understood the design patterns. I understand the architecture of the system, things like that. So there's some important things to understand, but it doesn't mean you have to be able to sit down and write code by yourself.
So you mentioned ensemble programming. Ensemble programming and pair programming. Is it the same wine in different bottles?
Ensemble is a kinder, gentler word for mob programming, where you have more than two people.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I use the word just pairing. I don't say pair programming.
Yeah,
I don't
just
say
pairing.
pair
Yeah.
anything. I just say pairing because
Mhm.
often just pairing with a tester and a programmer after, is at some point in time is very powerful. I love to pair with the programmer fixing bugs, for example, because we can just get all that stuff together and test it and work with it really quickly, and it's so much easier.
Here is a haunting question. I might want to say, how significant are Agile Scrum related certifications? Now, the reason why I say haunting is because this question just keeps coming back.
It does.
Just keeps. Yeah.
So I will say that I think it's what you want it for. If you've taken a certification because you wanted to learn something and you just wanted to have a piece of paper to say, hey, I've got something, that's cool, right? But you've put the learning into it. I think that when we start to use those certifications as something differently, when companies start saying, oh, I'm only hiring somebody who has this certification, that's creating false boundaries. It's like a university degree. I have a university degree. Does it make me a great anything? Right. I took computer programming in university, but I was, I'm going to say, an adequate programmer. I would never have been a super programmer. Just won't. Uh, which is why I'm so glad I found testing, because I'm testing. But just because you have that piece of paper doesn't mean you're really good at it. But it means you've learned something. At least I hope that that piece of paper means you learned something. Not that you know a lot of different words, but that you actually went out and practiced and learned and thought about it. So I'm not against, quote, certifications. I'm against how they're used sometimes.
Yeah, the learning is good. So going to a course to learn is a good thing. I know that people tell me in some countries you really do have to have certain certifications because, let's face it, a lot of employers, a lot of managers, they don't know anything about testing. They want to cover themselves from risk and say, well, I hired that person because they have the XYZ certification, so they can't be criticized for hiring somebody who's certified. So it depends. Nicola Lindgren has on her YouTube channel, she's got a really great short video of her view of a specific certification, but it kind of applies to all of them. And it's got some good takeaways for, where they're useful, where they're not. So I would recommend taking a look at that.
Yeah, I don't know whether it was during the time she had done the video already or after I had seen her video. I was having a chat with her and we were discussing how in certain geographies, certain testing certifications are treated compared to other regions. So there is a lot of biases, and we also see that these certifications tend to drive the entire testing culture, not just the mindset, but the entire culture.
Yeah.
So, for example, and I need to share this with you because so when I asked people about exploratory testing, and I was talking to Marit about it as well, that exploratory testing, people say, oh, you know what, we can do when we find some time, in our testing duration. Okay, they want to put it somewhere in between. Okay, instead I said, okay, how about making the entire journey as exploratory and fit in some scripted testing somewhere in between? Oh, no. That goes against the process. The process is that you document those test cases, you write the test cases, you write the test steps, and if you ask them why, because then they will say, oh, there is going to be an audit, and because we are a CMMI whatever certified, so as a part of the process, we need that documentation, and for that documentation, we need this. So the entire culture of the organization is messed up. So this is what happens, and certification is driving that, because every other person in that organization, every other tester is an ISTQB certified tester. And you ask them about testing, they will begin with the 7 testing principles, which is, I think, on page number 2 or 3 of the book of foundations of software testing.
Yeah.
And I had a nice laugh about it with when I was talking to Dorothy, because she's a co-author of that. She says, "Oh, you remember the page number also, because I have seen that so many times. I have seen that come
That's
up so
good.
many times that I just remember it." So this is what is happening, and that is why this question is
Yep.
that's why I'm saying that this is a haunting question. It keeps on coming back.
So I think because I've actually proctored quite a few ISTQB exams over the years. I do not have a certification from ISTQB, but I've proctored some of their exams. And I think that one of the things that people have to learn from that is because I had a friend who took it and she learned lots. But the trick is to learn what you can, but then go out and have that beginner's mindset again to say, now what is the real world about? How can I apply? How can I make this work for here? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Not about quoting definitions, but making sure that our team has the same definition. So that's what I use the quadrants for quite often, is to say, what kinds of testing do we do? Now, what do we mean by that? And making sure the team has a shared understanding, not that it's the quoted definition, right? And we have to take it one level further. So take the stuff, even people from our course, take that,
Mm-hmm.
but how can you adapt? I mean, even in our is it the second book that we showed a lot of different examples on the quadrants?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there are in the
In
second book.
Agile, yeah, and in Agile Testing Condensed, we showed lots
Yes,
of different models about the automation pyramid.
yes.
There is no one right way, period. Adapt, learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is probably the best advice I ever have to give.
Well,
Definitely.
Adapt and learn.
Mm-hmm.
Learn and adapt, I guess.
well, Janet, you didn't have to go too far. I am ISTQB certified, so you know I took the certification many years ago.
Yeah.
But then I also learned that that cannot be the only way we test or we think about testing. For me, what's been important through my career is to constantly think about the thinking that goes behind this. It's, yeah, we can read a book, read a blog, and say, okay, I'll follow these as a standard procedure, and I'll do this for everything that I test. But there is going to be one particular case where this is not going to fit.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're going to be stuck. So if you don't want to get stuck, you've got to keep your mind open, constantly keep learning, and constantly think about testing rather than, and like you said, I mean, always learn and adapt. Okay, in Agile, they say inspect and adapt, and you've added that beautifully, learn and adapt. So, that is a beautiful message. And that brings me to the next question, which is quite long, but I'm going to read this. So,
And
when working in Agile, the team is expected to be open for change. But if requirements are changing very frequently, then how should the team, especially testers, handle this?
Just do what you just said. Think about testing.
but I'm going to also say it depends on when they're changing, right? If you're talking about it as a team and you go, you know what, we learned something new, we're going to have to change this. But too often when I see questions like this, I see teams that they're working on a story, and in the middle of it, the product owner comes and says, "Oh, I changed my mind."
Yeah.
Right? And that's not what changing requirements is supposed to mean. It's
Yes.
supposed to mean that as we learn something, maybe we adapt and maybe we do it again. But in the middle of an iteration, for example, it's meant to be fairly, we understand the story, let's finish the story. If we need to, let's adjust. So in the middle of an iteration, there shouldn't be that much change. It should be an exception. It will happen, but it should be an exception. And using those things like acceptance test-driven development, fleshing out those concrete examples, that prevents things like this. It really does.
Yeah, I was going to say, getting involved, you can solve some of this in the planning stage by using techniques like using concrete examples, things like example mapping, story mapping, just let's understand before we start building things. And also making your stories an appropriate size. If you have big stories that take longer, you've got more window for change. So I like stories that we can be done in a day or two, including all the testing. Working in those really small chunks, it really reduces our risk. That said, extreme programming was supposed to be about embracing change, but we embrace the change. We can do that because we've broken things into very small pieces. We've got examples. We're working together to have that shared understanding.
Yep. And getting fast feedback. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Now, this is a very interesting question, and it is for you, Lisa, probably.
Yes.
You mentioned that you learned things from your donkeys that helped you understand Agile. Can you share some examples, experience?
Yeah, it's funny. I remember back one of the European testing conferences during the open space session. I don't remember how I got started, but we started having an open space session about what I learned from donkeys. But the biggest thing is that, I trained horses all my life before I got a donkey. And when I tried to train a donkey like I train a horse, which, using positive reinforcement and rewarding them for doing good things and stuff, it wasn't working with the donkey. And I couldn't figure out why. And I finally found a donkey trainer. And he said, well, it's all about trust. And he actually said, he's an old cowboy, so I was surprised he said this. He actually said that your donkey needs to know that you love him more than anything. But if they trust you, they will do absolutely anything for you. And if they do not trust you and they think that you don't have their best interest at heart, they will not do anything you want to do. That's why they have a reputation for being stubborn. And I had to work really hard to earn this donkey's trust because he had been abused. But once I did, my donkeys will go anywhere. They've gone inside schools to help teach kids. They've gone to assisted living homes. They'll just do anything, and they're so good. But if they came to harm while I was in charge, let's say I was driving them and the harness rubbed a sore on their shoulder, it would be all over. And it's like our teams. We need to trust each other on the team. We need to be able to trust the business. The business needs to be able to trust us to self-organize and deliver what they're expecting. It works in so many ways, and I think it's so foundational to Agile. So that's the biggest thing.
Absolutely, a huge lesson in building a culture of trust. We all talk about culture of quality, but at the foundation we have this culture of trust. If we don't have that, then whatever you call it, culture of quality or culture of stars or whatever, it doesn't matter. So beautiful lesson.
And it takes a long time to build up, but it can be very quickly broken.
Absolutely.
Janet, you were saying something here.
Oh, I was going to say, I've used my granddaughter to talk about trust as well.
Yeah.
Because her sport is acro. It's acrobatics, kind of. And so she was the flyer. So she was in a trio and she was the flyer, which meant she was the one that got thrown up in the air 15 feet and caught. And one day I asked her, I said, so isn't that scary? And she said, not really. And I said, why not? She said, because I know my bases are going to catch me. As simple as that. Total trust. And it doesn't come naturally. You have to work up to that.
and especially in teams where you have people with different belief systems,
Yes.
different values, different cultural
Yep.
perspectives. It is a hard thing to build, but once you build that, you know how beneficial that is.
Yep. For sure.
Well, I'm just looking at the list of questions. There are,
And I'm looking at the
uh,
time.
well, yeah, we've shot over the hour by 15 minutes. So thank you so much, ladies, for accepting my request and for making my dream come true. It has really been absolutely awesome. I have had this dream for many, many years that I would do an interview with the two of you. And here I am living my dream. Thank you for blessing me.
So
And
I have a thought, by the way, Burjesh.
yes,
If you could send us those questions,
yes,
perhaps Lisa and I could do blog posts answering them.
Yeah,
I,
that's a great idea.
I will definitely do that.
Or on
I-
our video.
On our
chat.
video chat. Yeah.
Yes, I will definitely do that. And I want to tell the audience and those who will watch the show later on YouTube or replay it on LinkedIn, wherever, that you know the YouTube site that Lisa and Janet have is a bundle of information, a bundle of knowledge. Please go check it out. You will find the link uh, in the description of this particular video. Also, if you visit Test Chat and look at the featured channels, you will find the channel as a featured channel. I couldn't resist myself from featuring it because I was like, okay, why should I be the only one getting benefits from here? And
Thank you.
and I don't know if I was the first subscriber, but I was definitely in the top 5 when you launched that channel. So
Awesome.
so whenever I meet you, I'll look for a goodie bag or something like that.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Rajesh, for all you do for the community and your
Absolutely.
YouTube channel, just for starters, because there's so much great content on there. So many awesome people that you've had
Yep.
on there.
Thank you. No, I'm just trying to do my bit, and it is people like you who inspire me and who inspire the testing community, make the testing community great. So thank you so much,
Thank
and
you.
you enjoy the rest of the day and have a wonderful weekend ahead.
Thank you so much. It's been a great
Take
pleasure.
care. Bye,
Cheers.
everybody.
Bye.